character is one of the most important aspects of a film. In many cases, it's the performance of the actors involved that most audiences connect with and pay attention to. Sure, the sets can be impressive, the effects can blow you away, but if the central performance isn't up to par, then the chances are the film as a whole won't go down well with the viewers. This idea works both ways though. There are plenty of films out there with some seriously impressive casting decisions that paid off wonders, but the film around the performance is a lackluster affair, which leaves you wondering how the filmmakers could squander such a fantastic opportunity. This list will take a look at such casting decisions. The following actors stand out head over shoulders above the films that they found themselves in, even when the movie itself really should have been just as excellent as the characters being portrayed on screen. From the big blockbusters that don't sit well with fans to dramatic biopics that manage to let themselves down despite the wealth of narrative possibilities. I am Kirsten from What Culture, and these are 10 perfect casting choices wasted on terrible movies. Number 10, Ewan McGregor, the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Now, before we get into Ewan McGregor, let's just get it out of the way now. The Star Wars prequels aren't all that bad. Revenge of the Sith is a fantastic addition to the franchise, and the overall story showing how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader is actually very well executed as a whole. Unfortunately, the trilogy is let down by an avalanche of poor dialogue, cringe-worthy character iterations, yes, we're looking at you, Padme and Anakin, and a bit too much CGI in places where it really needed to be toned down. Despite all of this, there is a clear saving grace throughout the 3 films, and that is Ewan McGregor and his iconic performance as Obi-Wan Kenobi. McGregor manages to fully embody the young Jedi Knight and anchor the entire trilogy with a measured and controlled performance. Despite McGregor's presence being a much-needed strong spot in the eyes of fans, the prequel trilogy didn't fully live up to the originals. But if watching Ewan McGregor yell, "You are my brother, Anakin!" or saying, "Hello there," doesn't get your blood pumping, then something has gone horribly wrong. Hopefully the upcoming Obi-Wan miniseries will make a better spectacle of McGregor to strut his stuff. Number 9, Andrew Garfield, The Amazing Spider-Man. Following Tobey Maguire's success as young hero Peter Parker, it was widely agreed that Andrew Garfield had his work cut out for him. Despite having an arguably more accomplished career than Maguire, for some fans it was, and still is, even with Tom Holland in the role, impossible to beat the first actor's version of Spider-Man. The things that should have been pretty solid with the Amazing Spider-Man films were the plot and the effects, and so fans were looking to Garfield to give a good performance and drive what was promised to be a great little blockbuster home. Alas, this was not what happened. Though Garfield did a top-notch job of capturing the wittier side of Spider-Man and offered up a refreshing take on the character, the films he found himself in were a shambles and then some. The first Amazing Spider-Man was a poor affair with little to no endearing qualities. With its over-the-top villain portrayals and off-kilter pace, the first of the 2 films doesn't manage to live up to its amazing title, even with a solid effort from Garfield. The second one should have learned from the mistakes of its predecessor, but like most sequels, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 fared even worse thanks to even more ill-placed effects, nonsensical fight scenes, and a poor, just plain bad villain, courtesy of Jamie Foxx. All in all, Andrew Garfield really did deserve better. Number 8, Margot Robbie, Suicide Squad. Harley Quinn was always going to be a difficult character to cast. With her psychotic tendencies, her relationship with the Joker, and her one-of-a-kind style, she was the most complex and anticipated character making her way into Suicide Squad's big screen debut. With Margot Robbie at the helm, Harley Quinn proved to be the best character in the film. She perfectly captured Harley's deep attachment to Joker, her unpredictability, and well, everything in between. Funny, insane, entertaining, and oddly endearing, Robbie was a blast to watch in the film from start to finish. Unfortunately, the rest of the flick didn't quite reach Robbie's level of brilliance. The rest of the cast, though phenomenal on paper, never seemed to hit the right beats. Will Smith seemed to be playing Will Smith, Adam Beach was tossed aside for no real narrative reason, Cara Delevingne still confuses fans to this day, and the less said about Jared Leto's Joker, the better. On top of the poor cast performances, Suicide Squad is also deflated by a convoluted plot, atrocious pacing, and laughably bad villains. The only person outside of Robbie who seemed to actually be engaged with their character was Jai Courtney, who brilliantly played Captain Boomerang, but was mostly sidelined throughout the film's unnecessarily long runtime. Margot Robbie was fantastic, but the rest of the film was poor at best, and deplorable at worst, and not deserving of her talents. Number 7, Martin Freeman, The Hobbit trilogy. Martin Freeman is a seriously good actor, and his much anticipated role in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings prequel, The Hobbit, was the kind of casting brilliance that comes along only once in a lifetime. Freeman was perfect as Bilbo Baggins, a peaceful hobbit thrust into a perilous adventure by Gandalf and a host of dwarves. Managing at once to be funny, heroic, relatable, and consistently on the ball, Freeman perfectly captured every aspect of the complex and iconic literary figure already played, albeit briefly, by the late Ian Holm, and made the role very much his own. Though the best part of the trilogy, the films surrounding his great performance were underwhelming additions to a franchise often considered to be one of the greatest of all time. Whilst Jackson was obsessed with perfection in the original trilogy and was massively focused on getting great real-life shots to add to the sweeping scenery, his direction in The Hobbit is much less concerned with this perfectionism and more interested in special effects and making as much money as possible. That last point might seem harsh, but making a 300-page novel into 3 films totaling nearly 9 hours of runtime, you can't help but think he's trying to squeeze out as much cash as he can from fans of the perfect original trilogy. The effects are overdone, the scenery lacks a sense of realism, and the plot plods all the time. Martin Freeman then was a breath of fresh air, totally wasted. Number 6, Eva Green, Sin City 2. The first Sin City remains an original masterclass in filmmaking, which happily and effectively breaks all the rules. Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, then, should have been just as good, if not better. But after waiting 9 years for a sequel, it's safe to say that the film flopped and deflated fans' hopes of it reliving the wildness of the original. Simply put, for a film showing off still stylish violence, sex, angst, and darkness, Sin City 2 gets boring unbelievably quick, lacking the brutality of the original and struggling to find a balance between recreating the tone of its predecessor and breaking new ground. The one saving grace in the film is Eva Green's portrayal of Ava Lord, the film's femme fatale who is as deceptive and cruel as she is beautiful and enticing. Green swallows the role whole and perfectly embodies the twisted, complex nature of the character. In a movie that seemed destined to succeed, this sequel has very little to keep it from falling apart, and though Eva Green was a welcome addition to the ensemble, even she couldn't save the film that followed. Number 5, Leonardo DiCaprio, J. Edgar. Leonardo DiCaprio is one of cinema's most versatile and beloved actors. It seems as though he's one of those rare performers who never goes wrong in his film choices. But there is one blip on his resume. Although Clint Eastwood's biopic on J. Edgar Hoover sounds like it should have been a rousing success, especially when you see it stars DiCaprio alongside the likes of Judi Dench and Naomi Watts, on screen the film proved to be a rather messy affair. With its uneven script and poor prosthetic makeup, J. Edgar was a shambolic, confusing melodrama which never really seemed to find its footing in terms of plot or theme. Despite this, DiCaprio still manages to shine as the titular character, playing the controversial figure with sympathy, intelligence, and understanding, but also with a daring attempt to show Edgar's weaknesses and flaws. In hindsight, the role should have given DiCaprio another Oscar nomination, but this never came to pass quite simply because the rest of the film wasn't willing to meet his level. Number 4, Zac Efron. Extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. There's no doubt that Zac Efron has come a long way since his days as Troy Bolton in the High School Musical series, with his career taking on a more mature tone as he's grown older. It's clear that Efron has been giving it his all to move away from that defining part of his career. When it was announced that he would be playing none other than the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy in the upcoming awkwardly titled Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, it seemed as though Efron was ready to completely reinvent himself. And in a lot of ways, he did just that. His performance as Bundy was absolutely brilliant. Cold, creepily charming, deceptive, and subtle. It was really an award-worthy effort. That said, the rest of the film plays more like a sensationalist melodrama than a svelte and measured character study. Instead, the film glorifies the legend of Bundy's charm and intelligence and spends too much time recreating the court case line for line, rather than reminding viewers of just how awful and unhinged Bundy was. Efron is there ready to tackle such a challenge, but the film is never willing to meet him, and suffers because of it. Number 3, Ben Affleck, the DCEU. Batman castings have never really gone over well with the general public. No one wanted to see funny man Michael Keaton back in the 80s, and now everyone's losing their minds at the prospect of him coming back to the big screen, and I personally think he was one of the best. Even Christian Bale, who ended up leading Nolan's masterful Dark Knight trilogy, was regarded as a bad choice for the Caped Crusader when his role was announced. It was no surprise then when fans were split by Ben Affleck's casting for Zack Snyder's Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice back in 2016. When the film was released, however, it came as a welcome surprise that Batfleck was actually pretty damn good. Brutal, uncompromising, menacing and harsh, Affleck brought a gritty darkness to the role that hadn't really been seen before. When it came time for him to return in Justice League, it was much of the same, and he nailed it. The films, however, were both pretty shoddy. A mess of characters, odd twists, incoherent plotting, and a rushed and poorly executed need to create a franchise like the MCU, both Dawn of Justice and Justice League fall down horribly, despite solid acting from a man who never got the opportunity to give fans a good film to go with a great performance. Here's hoping that Robert Pattinson can pull off something just as epic. Number 2, Thomas Hayden Church, Spider-Man 3. Like the Star Wars prequels, Sam Raimi's third Spider-Man outing is not quite as bad as you may remember. That being said, it's fair to say that it could have been better if they hadn't thrown so many subplots at us or shown so much of Tobey Maguire's weird, cringe-worthy dancing. Perhaps the best part of the film is Thomas Hayden Church's performance as Flint Marko / Sandman, one of the primary antagonists alongside Venom, played by Topher Grace, and a new Goblin, played by James Franco. Whilst Grace and Franco both fall unbelievably flat during the film's excessive runtime and the threat of Venom isn't fully realised until the final act, a wasted opportunity in itself, Church does a pretty impressive job at balancing Marco's criminal turn with his need to secure money for his ill daughter. It's a very effective story, which of course hits some bumps. The retcon of him being Uncle Ben's real killer is a little hollow, but thanks to Church's commitment to the role, Marco remains the most endearing and two-dimensional character in the entire film, who deserved much more time to be thoroughly explored. Unfortunately, all anyone can recall from this film is Maguire's dancing and both Grace and Franco's over-the-top acting, and that's unfair because Church really was quite good. Number 1, Everyone. Gangster Squad. Gangster Squad came out in 2013 and follows a secret group with the LAPD who band together to take down ruthless mobster Vicky Cohen. It's got violence and a stellar cast, but it's also got no clue what it's trying to be. Here's a brief rundown of the cast. So, we have Josh Brolin, Ryan Gosling, Anthony Mackie, Robert Patrick, Michael Pena, Emma Stone, and Sean Penn. Now, with a cast like that and a plot promising some sort of epic Untouchables-like scenario, thick with drama, action, and a great plot, you'd expect the film to be amazing. But it's not. Stumbling through a story which offers no real intensity or drive, Gangster Squad is irredeemably sloppy and a complete disaster, tripped up by its need to be a serious Oscar-baiting crime drama. The characterizations are thin, the motivation is never really there, and director Ruben Fleischer tries to make the whole thing stylish and striking, but ends up making every set piece and action sequence look unbelievably dull. Despite these massive, inescapable flaws, the cast all do a pretty good job with the material they're given. Gosling and Stone's romantic subplot is probably the film's high point, and Brolin, Ribisi, Patrick, Pena, Mackie and Nolte all bring their A-game to some seriously underwritten characters. Gangster Squad should have been great, but ends up sounding just as juvenile as its title suggests. And there you are, the 10 perfect casting choices wasted on terrible movies. Let us know if any of these were your favourites down in the comments below. If you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button as well as the little bell icon to be notified of any new videos coming your way. But for now, I have been Kirsten Ria from WhatCulture.com, and I will see you in the next video.